All right, welcome to Gen X DC. This is the place where we talk all things Washington, D.C. from a Generation X perspective. I'm producer Spencer from the WGTS 91.9 morning show with Jerry and Blanca, and I'm joined by...
I'm Dan Lucota. I'm the former morning show producer at WMAL Radio. I did that from 1992 to 2002.
And Dan, you are perfectly qualified to talk about what we're going to talk about today. And what was big in the 70s and 80s? No, you look no further than 6:30 on the dial, WMAL. And of course, you work there. Let's talk WMAL in the 70s and 80s.
And, recently I was thinking more about WMAL as well because Andy Ockershausen had passed away this week. And Andy O, as everyone knew him, was quite the pillar of that station. I mean, he helped build them to what they became in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So it was sad to hear that he passed away this week. He was a good guy. I had the pleasure of knowing him. I didn't work under him, but I had the pleasure of knowing him. And I smile today thinking about, him and what he did for that station.
Well, and you'd always hear his name. The funny thing is, years later, he had a podcast with his wife.
Yes.
And it was really good. I mean, it just he talked to different people in the DC area and people associated with all different walks of life, and it was just really good. And it's a shame. He's somebody who really made a difference in our community, and he's the one that found Hardin and Weaver, right?
He put Hardin and Weaver together. He had a hand in that. He really, Sonny, Sam, and Frank with the Redskins had a hand in that. So, you start looking at the things that made MAL what made them. And right. Andy O's right there. Well, he was a general manager that was really merged himself to the community, to the business side of it, to the audience side of it, understood radio, and the promotion part of that puzzle. And by putting all those pieces together, he created one heck of a radio station that lives on to this day. I would argue, and then someone might, it's not the case. I would argue that, Andy was one of the ones, if not the one, that still gave it its name to this day.
Well, I can definitely agree to that because, I wake up in the morning and I listen to Hardin and Weaver on WMAL, and I'd end my day listening to Sports Call with Ken Beatrice. And, you produced the Hardin and Weaver show.
Yes.
So tell us a little about Hardin and Weaver. Now, what I remember, I would get up early in the morning. I would listen to them as I was getting up, getting ready for school. And I loved, they had a march. They had characters. Yeah. They were good to kids. It was a family type atmosphere. I loved it. It was incredible. Tell us a little bit about Hardin and Weaver. And to me, they were like grandpa figures.
Well, yeah, they were community. They got the fact that they were touchable by the audience. They understood this town. Again, that's programming 101. You got to know who you're broadcasting to. They understood that. They were genuinely funny, and they poked at themselves and at the politics around them in a way that everyone enjoyed. And so they were great guys. And the funny thing is, they got older over time. And when I produced them, they were, older, considered, grandfather-esque kind of gentlemen, but they lasted because somehow they were able to
have
heart, and they were the sages of the world around you. That's hard to do because, as you know, the time is not your friend in any sort of entertainment. From singing to looks to whatever, but they were able to stand the test of time. That says a lot about them and a lot about that station. So,
absolutely. In the morning, they'd have Johnny Holiday, one of my all-time favorites, with
and
sports. Later, Bud Steele at the news.
Yeah, Bud Steele, Bob Nizer.
Bob Nizer, I remember Bob Nizer.
Mark Weaver.
That's right.
Joan Doniger. You had a lot of these newscasters that were fantastic. Behind the scenes,
there's actually a tape floating around with me on a cassette from like the late 70s, acting like Johnny Holiday, Hardin and Weaver, and Bud Steele. You'll have to hear that sometime.
All right, I got to hear that. I'm Bud Steele, WMAL. And
but I loved it also because, I was speaking of Johnny Holiday because the Maryland games, at nighttime, I felt like Johnny Holiday would take you to the Maryland games, and he still does. So I would remember it was like I was at Cole Fieldhouse. I would put these big headphones on with a big stereo, and I just listen to his voice, and he would explain everything that's happening, and I could just I could hear the squeaks of the tennis shoes. You could almost hear them wiping up sweat from the
Oh, wow.
the floor. Okay, maybe
Yes.
that's a little exaggeration, but it was like we were there. It was just an incredible experience. And then, of course, the Redskins with Frank Herzog, who is like Johnny Holiday is to college sports. Frank Herzog to me for pros with doing the Bullets, and then of course incredible voice of the Redskins, and then, of course he did it with Sam and Sonny all those years.
And then don't forget Tim Brandt. He was doing after
Tim
Johnny.
Brand, that's right. You got a chance to work
Sports. Yeah, I
because you
worked
were
with Timmy when Jackson Weaver passed away. Timmy became the co-host with
right.
Frank. So worked closely with Tim 10 years. 10 years working with Timmy.
In Andy
Good guy
Park,
as
so Tim
well.
Andy.
And Andy
Yeah.
Parks. Andy Parks came in as a third, and then it was Frank, Tim, and Andy, and then it became Tim and Andy. And I took it till Tim and Andy.
And then, of course,
10 years.
Tim was on Channel 7 for years, right? I mean, I
Tim
remember
did,
years ago he's on, but then
yeah,
even in the later days, I think was he off
came
WMAL
back.
and he was still on?
Yeah, what he did was he was doing television, came over to
Okay.
MAL.
And very good television guy, too.
Oh, fantastic with TV. I
Yep,
mean, Timmy's a great sports guy in general. He's a good
absolutely.
personality. Um, I love him. He was a good guy. He's fun to work with. We had a good time, good run with Tim.
Yeah,
Great on sports, quick on sports, good sense of
absolutely.
humor. Yeah, great sports guy. I mean, just
And speaking of sports, I got to talk Kim Beatrice.
oh,
Kim
God
Beatrice, if
love
you
you.
don't know,
God love you.
Sports Call on WMAL was incredible. That's right. He would do Kim Beatrice did Sports Call, and the thing I liked about it, he included everyone. When I was a kid, I was too shy to call in. I'll get my friends to call in and ask the questions that I would want to know. But he always offered. Kids call in. He'll never give anybody short shrift. That's what he said. Never give anybody short shrift. He'd give his office number out. Give me a call here at the state. Never had the guts to do it, but
Oh, sure.
he had his sources, his scouts, his, it just it was unbelievable. And then I know you loved his commercials.
God love you. The obbies there in law. You can get the curly
Bernie
fries.
Streeter.
I don't myself. I'm not a big fan of curly fries. You can get the curly fries. Don't
I don't
forget
eat
the
French fries.
Jamocha
I'm told
shake.
they're very good.
My doctor says I can't eat them. It's great. He
You
would
got to try the Jamocha.
gotta try Jamocha shake. There, hair's really good.
I still to this day have never
Oh,
tried the Jamocha, but I have it in my head.
it's
I
still
hear
there. And that
that's right.
Arby's is still in Laurel. I passed
But
it.
just I remember just listening to him at nighttime and just imagining being on the radio. I mean, everybody on WML, whether it's Kim Beatrice or Hardin Weaver, Johnny Holly, all those people. Every time I would listen, I made me want to go on the radio. I mean, Bill Mayhew
Bill
overnight.
Mayhew. Oh,
Bill Mayhew's
his
voice.
voice.
Now, see, this is why I thought I would never have a chance for radio, because the way he had this incredible
Yeah, his pipe.
radio voice, the
His
quintessential
pacing.
radio voice. It's unbelievable.
It was his pacing, his cadence, the way he.
Okay. Yeah.
Welcome to WMAL.
What was he like? You
Oh,
worked at
I
WMAL.
love Bill. Bill was great. I would see him in the mornings when I came in. I'd get there about 3:30,
Uh-huh.
get the show prep, and he was still on the air, and so he would either be hanging out. We had a little lunchroom, we called it. He'd be sitting in there as music was playing, or he would be sitting in the studio. I'd poke in and say, "Hey, good morning, Bill," and he was quite the guy with the big band era music. Any question about that time frame, Frank, Dino, any of those guys, he knew the answers. So I would tease him every once in a while. I go, yeah, about a new artist versus Frank. He just rolls his eyes. Go show prep, Dan. But it was just to hear these guys' voices. Growing up,
Absolutely. I mean, all of them.
growing up listening
in the
to
afternoon.
and sitting in a room where they're talking was like
Right. I can't imagine that. That is unbelievable.
It's really
But I listen more to Lion and Walker. I guess you listen more to Trumbull and Core.
yeah, I would catch more.
And for those of you who don't know, Chris Core, who, if you're not as old as we are and listen to him on WML, he was just recently on TOP, did Core Values. Great job doing that.
Yeah.
And tell us a little about Trumbull. You knew him a little bit too.
I knew
right?
Trumbull a little bit more because Trumbull would come in a little earlier than Chris for the most part. So, we would overlap a little bit. I mean, Chris was more of an afternoon, prepping in the afternoon. I'd get out of there by 8 o'clock or so. I'd be deep in something. But Bill would come in maybe 11-ish. So I'd run in more into Bill. And genuinely funny. I mean, I loved his sense of humor. Everything was had a twist to it, and in a fun way. He could twist anything. He could be dry, sarcastically dry, or
Right.
his humor was, and he'd write stuff out. I mean, he was that humor guy, and very thoughtful in that sense of thinking something. If you gave him a simple object, he would give you 10 things about the object that you never saw. That's how much
Right.
deep into things he was. And on Fridays, every once in a while, I'd catch him. Chuck Eisenhower was our traffic guy, traffic being
Uh-huh.
commercials in a radio station. And one of the engineers, they'd have Pizza Friday. So I'd pop in the studio. They sat in the one studio and had pizza, and I'd pop in and say hi to the guys and talk to him for a little
Wow.
while. So yeah, he was a good guy. I like
That
Tom.
that just that what an awesome experience. And what about weekends? I think both of us
Yeah.
listened to the same. You listened to David Byrd, didn't you? Before
The
you knew him.
Birdman. I love Bird.
I mean, David Byrd to me, I mean, he was just so funny. There's certain, there's certain people that make you laugh, and they could say pretty much anything. And,
Yeah.
and it just made, you were mentioning cadence before, maybe it was the cadence, I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
I would just, whenever he was on, I would go, whether it was, Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock or whatever, and I'd turn it on and,
Yeah, David has a
just have to listen.
David has a good sense of humor, and it's it's quirky and it's fun and it's
Right,
funny. I liked it when he filled in on the show for one of the guys, because you never knew quite where you were going. You'd
right.
had the show planned, but it's like, David would be asking you to have a guest on, wrote a book or something, and David would be going off on a tangent question. You're like, okay, that's pretty funny, or he'd get into things. I mean, not just funny, but he'd get into other things as well, serious sides of things, and ask questions. You're like, yeah, that's a great question to be asking. So yeah, and David's still around. I keep up with him to this day, and yeah, he still makes me smile and laugh and with his
Well,
comments.
that's the thing about WMAL back then, in the 70s and 80s. That, I mean, to me, they were almost like family. And
Yes.
I don't even want to say almost. I felt like they were my family. It was my grandparents at the Bullfighting with Hardin and Weaver. I
Yeah.
listened to my buddy Ken at night. Johnny would give me the sport, the Maryland games, and Frank, of course, gives me the. You know, I felt like I knew everybody. I really felt like I knew
Well,
everybody.
you did, because I found out later that what you heard on the radio, for the most part, for most, I would say 90% of these guys is who they were.
That's
Who
awesome.
they were. Tim
Thank you,
Brand,
thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to hear that. That's great.
who you heard on the radio for Tim was Tim.
Yeah,
Who you
right,
heard on the radio for Andy was Andy. Frank,
right.
yes. Jack, yes. Bill Mayhew, yes. Bill
Yeah.
Trumbull, yeah. I mean, these guys were who you were hearing, and that was a great part of like working there. It's like, oh my goodness, they really are these cool guys. Nobody ever, was completely opposite.
Right.
I mean, I had some guests come in over the years that I thought were like, oh yes, this is this wonderful actress is going to be amazing. And
Uh-huh.
when you're done, you're like, wow, that was a train wreck. That,
Right.
I lost my respect for that.
Anyone in particular that you'd want to point out?
Seeing we're in the
Oh,
public view, I'm going to be a good boy and not get myself in
okay.
any
Yeah.
possible lawsuits from someone.
You're still a loyal producer. Okay.
I have to keep my, my producers. The one thing I
Right.
regret is being a producer, and I
Yeah.
wish I would have gone, if I could go back and do it all over again. In a sense, I would get a giant poster, sort of like my chord chart back here, that said
Right.
WMAL on it, and I'd have everybody sign it that came through.
Oh,
Because I always felt like when you stepped into the studio, you were in a sanctuary. You didn't need to be pestered by me going, can I have your autograph? Can I get a picture with you? I never did that. I just never felt like
right.
I wanted to do that. I wanted them to be comfortable in our studio and be able to
Absolutely.
give me the best they had without feeling like, oh boy, here we go
Right.
again. I never did it. A couple I did. I had to get Art Monk's signature. It was just,
Wow. That's awesome.
I didn't. 99.9% I didn't do it. And I thought to myself, if I had a poster like that up in my office, and I'd have them come in with a Sharpie and signed it, and the more you got, the more they would sign. That's my only regret in
Look,
that sense of like, I
I
should.
did the same thing with Charles Mann. I got him to autograph my Wheaties box, and he let me wear his Super Bowl ring.
I've had it on too.
It didn't fit me,
Took
but
two of my fingers. There's a picture of me somewhere. I'm like this.
yeah.
I'm like this with it, and it's on these two fingers. That's how big his hands are. He did sports for it. He filled in for sports for us when he first
Yeah, I knew that. That was
yeah.
before he went to TV, right?
Before he went
Then he went to Channel 9.
we were like at one of his first gigs. He came over and we had him do
Right.
sports for us. It was fun. He's a great guy. I love Charles.
Absolutely. One of my all-time favorites.
Darryl Green too. Darryl Green's faster than me.
Yep.
Just saying.
Well, yeah, you're faster than most people.
Yes. Wonderful people. Wonderful days. WMAL, a great radio station. Again, sorry to see the passing of Andy O.
Yeah.
My heart goes out to Janice, his wife. She's a wonderful person as well. In fact, she was a producer, one of the producers in over the years for Hardin and Weaver as well.
Wow. And I didn't know that.
Yep. Janice
That's
is a good
interesting.
person as well. Yep. My last day at the radio station, she brought a cake in and made a big thing out of me.
See, it is family. It's family.
It
And that's,
was. It was.
Again, listening to them growing up, my whole life, I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be on a radio station that was like family. And you go in there and they're like family. That's how I feel at where I work at WGTS. It just, it feels just like, it's what I dreamed of. Now, of course, we're not talking sports as much. As a matter of fact, we don't talk sports a lot at all.
God love you doing
except
sports.
Claude and I off there, but
you're doing sports on WGTS. Coming up now.
It's not gonna have no Bernie Street or Arby's. We're not gonna have any of that. but we have a great time together. Yeah, we care about each other, and it just it's one of those things that, man, that's what I dream. And to hear you say that so many people are just like they were, just how I remember them, that Hardin and Weaver and, all those guys were just, the way I heard them on the radio. That makes me feel so good inside.
And I was going to add, as you said with WGTS, I hear that, and I think listeners do as well. You're a community radio station. There's not much of that. There's a lot of satellite syndication, a lot of not, hometown, not here, not local station. Feeds coming in. You got your K-Loves, you got your competition. I think you guys got them hands down because you're here in your community. You can reach out and touch you. You're not calling an 800 number to LA. You're calling to Rockville, Maryland, and Gaithersburg, Maryland. You're calling from here to here. And that
I love that. We love this area, both of us. That we both grew up here in the area, both grew up in Adelphi, Prince George's County, and the DMV, the DC area to us is the greatest place on earth.
I think so. The most powerful city in the world.
City in the world.
Say he used to come out.
That's right.
Washington D.C., the most powerful city in the world, and you know what? I think we are.
We get it. We get a bad rap sometimes, but I got to tell you, we have everything here. I mean, whether with me liking sports or you loving Bruce Springsteen and all different kinds of bands. All the bands come through here. We have we're not far from the beach. We're a good location. Baltimore's not too far away. You can get to New York not too far away. There's so many things to do in our area history wise, and museums, free museums. Who could ask for more?
Free for now, but free.
Dan, it's been great talking to you about WML. This has brought back so many memories. I think I'm going to go have a little cry, and I might go on YouTube today and go listen to some old Hardin and Weaver.
Always a pleasure, Spencer. Thanks for taking the time with me.